So welcome everybody to episode 22 of On Air. Today we are joined by Andrea Moriarty, the author of Radical Inclusion, What I Learned About Risk, Humility, and Kindness for My Son with Autism, and co-organizer of our current virtual exhibition, Radical Inclusion Traveling Art Exhibition. Today, Andrea will be telling us more about how this exhibition came to be, the ideas and concepts behind them. And if you are interested in hearing from some of the artists from the exhibition, check out their artist talk from last week, Friday, which is currently on our Facebook page under videos, but will be uploaded on our YouTube as well. And if you're interested in looking at their work, check out our website, luxartinstitute.org, and look for Radical Inclusion. There, all the images are uploaded with stories about their collaboration. So Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited for you to share more about this really amazing program and, you know, this really incredible story. So let's just start.
Yeah.
Radical inclusion. Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you for having me and giving me a chance to, explain the sort of the behind the scenes backstory of it.
I mean, I think that's such an important part of this exhibition. I think, there's a lot of us, there's this really important message to it that, not only is it such a wonderful collaboration, but the message behind it is so powerful, and we want to make sure that we are celebrating both. So thank you for joining us. So Radical Inclusion Traveling Art Exhibition started with your book, Radical Inclusion, What I Learned About Risk, Humility, and Kindness for My Son with Autism. What drove you to write this book?
Well, I have a son who's 26 today, in fact.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Reed's birthday.
Happy birthday, Reed.
So when he finished high school, my husband and I were brainstorming, what is he going to do? He happens to be a twin, so his twin was leaving for college. He was not going to be doing that, but we were trying to figure out what his adult life would look like. And he's always been really motivated by music and anything with a mic. So at that point, now this is going back at least 6 years, we came up with the idea of starting a podcast for him. And so his podcast has been going for 6 years, and he interviews folks like a lot of musicians and the CEO of Trader Joe's, the head writer of Sesame Street. Folks, we've taken his special interest and sort of run with it. And so folks that he finds interesting, we just ask if he can sit down and would they be on his podcast. So about 50 podcasts into that, it's been a big adventure for our family. And 50 podcasts into it, I started to see a pattern that all these people who said yes to an unlikely conversation were showing risk, humility, and kindness. And I began to see those as building blocks for inclusion culturally. So the book, which I have here, it drove me to write the book because I wanted to tell the stories of these amazing heroes and how they touched our hearts by opening the doors of their, corner executive offices to this unlikely podcast host. And so they would let Reed in, and not knowing necessarily anything about autism, but just saying yes to that unlikely conversation. And I think it's really relevant to what's going on, in the world today, is to just invite those conversations. And so they did, and I wanted to share those stories. I also, as Reed gets older, I'm really motivated to create an adult life for him, because I realize he's going to outlive my husband and I want him to have a rich adult life. And he's also always going to need support. So he needs to be engaged in the community, and he needs people to help him be successful. And so in the book, I tell stories of making a podcast, but I also outline 12 model programs for adults with disabilities around the world. And one of them is with the idea that we need more, right? Because 1 in 50 boys now is impacted by autism. And so as they grow up and become adults, they'll our communities just need more of these types of programs that help them reach their potential and help them not just be marginalized and shut in apartments watching TV all day.
Yeah, and these programs ideally would be integrated, you know, with other programs, you know, from all different types of communities.
Exactly. And so that's what drove me to write the book, was to perpetuate that kind of engagement in community for Reed and peers like him, who have so much potential and lots of passions and motivations and dreams, and yet they need lots of support to fulfill those.
I love what you said, Andrea, about saying yes to conversations, because I think a lot of these conversations are out there and they're being offered, and you know, they're open to the public, but I think right now we've so far struggled saying yes to actually partaking in these conversations. And like you said, you know, now we're all learning to start saying yes, and I think it's such an important message, you know, to say yes to these conversations that we've never had before, and we should be having. Yeah.
Right. What happens, most people, once they hear someone's story or once they say yes to that conversation, a lot flows out of that, whether it's compassion, understanding, patience. You know, it's that initial risk of saying yes that then opens the door to more understanding and belonging, ultimately, which I think is our greatest human need for all of us. And so as other folks include Reed or include anyone who's marginalized, there's a mutual sense of belonging that results. And that's what we all crave as human beings.
Definitely. I really love that. So now, how did this concept, how did you bring these concepts to the conversation about artistic expression, which is what, you know, the traveling art exhibition, it's an artistic expression. How did you go? I mean, of course, Reed's podcast itself is an artistic expression as well, but how did you end up bringing that to a visual arts conversation?
Right. Well, one of the 12 programs in the book, chapter 12, in fact, is Creativity Explored, which is an incredible creative arts workspace that's integrated in San Francisco. So I researched them and highlight them in the book. And then when it came time for the cover design, I licensed the artwork, which is maybe visible here in the background. And I'll show you a little sketch of Jose Nunez's artwork. These are his figures. He's from El Salvador and has a developmental disability of some sort. I'm not quite sure, but he's also an incredible artist. And so I licensed the artwork for the book from Creativity Explored, and they represent more than 100 artists' work in their space, and they've sold their work to Crate and Barrel, to corporations. There's a hotel up there that has it hanging in their lobby, and so they've been really, really wonderful at representing artists in the and helping them have a vocation and make money through their artwork, and kind of serving as that business portion that many artists need, and also mentoring them with collaborative experiences with other professional artists. So it's a great place. And then I went up there to deliver a book to Jose, who is that artist. And so that was a great experience, and I have a photo of that, which I'll show you in a bit. But coming home from that trip, I thought, we need something like that in San Diego. And so many of Reed, you know, Reed is not a painter or a drawer or a visual artist at all, but so many of his friends are. And so when I went, you know, started to think about how to market the book, I really didn't want to just have marketing events to sell books. I really wanted to show the idea and show what I'm talking about and what the vision is in the book. So one way to do that was to create this. Just flying home from San Francisco, I had the thought that how hard would it be to do an art show that was collaborative with 6 visual artists with autism and 6 without, have it go to 6 venues. I started with 12. I don't know why. 12 was sort of a magic number, but I thought, just off the top of my head, I could think of 12 artists with disability. And then I thought, what if we paired them with a collaborator who they could learn from and model, and who could also learn from them? And they would have that shared passion like Reed has had with many musicians. He just released his 4th album. And so he has learned so much by recording and songwriting with other musicians. And so I wanted that for some of his peers. And so I came home and thought, let's do an art show instead of just a book launch. What if we did it as, again, a way to show the principles in the book? And so I called 2 places, and then it was just a series of yeses. I called Synergy, which is a nonprofit in Solana Beach that supports artists at risk. And Naomi Nussbaum, their director and founder, immediately said, yes, we want to help you do this. What would it look like? We'll fund the stipend. She checked with her board and they funded a stipend for the artists. And she put out a call to artists on her extensive mailing list. And then most of her artists are neurotypical. So then I reached out to Revision, and Joy Bow has founded Revision, which is much like Creativity Explored, but smaller in San Diego. And she has about 6 clients who go there and paint. It's a creative workspace for adults with disabilities. And so 2 of my friends' adult children paint and work out of Revision. And so Joy came on board, and the 3 of us went through the call to artists and matched. Naomi encouraged me to make it 6, not 12, for the first time, which was wise. And so we went through the applications and matched people based on genre and geography and their ability to connect in person for these 3 sessions. And then we ended up with many more venues. The idea was to make it, the radical nature of it was to make it very public and to have this artwork be in churches, bars, libraries, public places where everyone could see it and appreciate the interaction and the relationship. And we had so many places that really, there were 12 venues, because the 3 libraries picked it up, and it's just been a great tour. And then we came to Lux, and Lux is like a cornerstone institution because you are a legitimate arts organization that's appreciating in the utmost as creative expression.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to give a little bit of background to everybody else, our Brandes Gallery, or Linda from a Brandes Gallery, is focused on creating platforms for our community and regional artists and celebrating, the amazing things that are happening in our own community regionally. And we collectively, as a Brandes committee, propose artists and have conversation about it. So it's really this community space. And when you approached us about radical inclusion, we really felt, the importance of being part of this conversation. And so we are also really excited that you came to us and proposed this.
And you're such a great partner in this, because what I love about Creativity Explored is they really embrace their artists as unique voices in the contemporary art scene. And that's a very different approach than just a recreational program or daycare, worse yet, adult daycare for marginalized adults. And so it shifts the whole narrative to say, wait a minute, these are contemporary voices in society. And I think you very much understand that. And you've been a great partner to help us just spread that sensitivity in San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, I think, everything about the art world, and but also like expression in general, we all express in such different ways. And, you know, I don't think that one is a higher form of expression than the other. And that's the point of having these conversations, is to show that, you know, ultimately we can learn to communicate and understand through all of these different expressions. And there's so much to learn from people when you say yes to the conversation. So,
Right.
yeah. Um, so well, I think you already talked about your collaborators, Revision and Synergy, but tell us a little bit more about how how everything went after you started this. Kind of, how did the artists' collaborations work? How was the response from the community?
Yes. Well, the artists got together in pairs for 3 sessions, and some of them are in Chula Vista and some of them are in Encinitas, you know, sort of that whole sweep from South County to North County. And we didn't do a lot of preparation. We really intentionally let the artists within and their passion for the materials or passion for artistic expression take over and lead the interaction. So I think we sent them, we did very little preparation or orientation. We just said, jump in and you share the same passion, we know that, and you'll just figure out the rest. Much like the podcast with Reed. And
just to interject, because that reminds me of something that we talked about last week, Friday, when we were talking with the artist. The word that was really coming up a lot was kind of this authentic experience, which is, you know, again, what you're describing now, this realness to the collaboration that happened, this authentic expression, which I think is really important, you know, that we continue to celebrate in the art world, is that authenticity and celebrating that diversity.
The idea wasn't that it was therapy and that, you know, there was no agenda. It was do a collaborative piece, and Joy created a prompt that they each were given, but it was very broad.
Tell us about that. I also love the prompt. I think it's really great.
Yes, she was genius about that too. So the prompt was, what does community mean to you? And so they were each think, you know, they could just take that in multiple ways, but it gave them a little bit of direction. And so some of the artists, you know, 2 of the artists are nonverbal. One communicates with a facilitated communication board pointing. And, you know, so his experience with his paired artist was that they sat down at a table with 2 canvases. They sat side by side in what in the autism world is called parallel play, very much joint attention. So they had 2 canvases, and I don't think there was probably any talking between them, but he quickly understood what was happening here, and they painted on their own canvases, and then they passed them, you know, back and forth. And Stevenson wrote messages on the canvas that the place where he works and his support person had never seen him do this before. So he was literally writing codes into the painting. My first time, thank you. And it was very much of a dialogue on canvas, literally.
Yeah.
Another one of the pairs, one of the artists was very reluctant, very resistant to going to a new space. And they had, the first 2 times were kind of tricky, you know. I mean, the reality was because I know some of the parents, you know, his mom told me afterwards, I don't know if I can get him to go back the second time. But so we sort of rode these waves of discomfort, but he did go back. And in the end, you know, he really grew a lot, and that partnership is staying together. They've stayed in touch and continued to work together. And in his case, you know, each of them had a new experience. One of them really loved a stationary tub where they washed brushes, and it was a garage studio that they worked out of. And so for many of them, it was the first time they'd seen a dedicated art studio space. You know, maybe at home they work at a kitchen table, but they're all in their early 20s and just beginning to have a direction that this would be their adult vocation. And so they were learning, what does it mean to be a professional artist? And so they saw studios. Another one of the pairs, one of the artists was abstract and one was very figurative. And so they had to find common ground in a different way of painting. But that's how we grow, right?
Definitely, yeah. And we talked about that too, you know, how you can learn from each other, but make what you learn your own and create your own expression within that. Oh, sorry, my cat. Yeah, and I'm sorry. I got distracted.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking of the examples that how they grew and what they loved. I have a picture, which I'll tell maybe the story with that, of Jack's beret.
Oh, I love that, yes.
In his case, his partner was encouraging him to work at an easel in a vertical way, which he had not done. He'd always worked on a table. And he said, oh no, I could never do that, right? It was something new, which he was resisting. I could never do that. To do that, I would need a beret, because he'd seen French painters with an easel and they always had a beret. So that was his association. And so the next time he returned, she had a beret for him. And okay, well then he would have to try this new thing. So I think part of the discovery process was informing the relationship was that authentic listening to the story, but then also honoring that and saying, all right, if you need a beret to do this, I'll get you a beret. And it's just a beautiful example of being flexible and accommodating and honoring his perception of what a painter at an easel would need. Yeah. And somehow, just how simple and beautiful it is to have that gesture of, well, then let me get you a beret and then we'll do it.
Yeah, and I also love, you know, kind of this idea that the other artists, this cat. I'm sorry. Yeah. So sorry. This is the first time I got this distracted by the cat. But I also
camera dog, cat.
I know, like, welcome to the at-home Zoom live. I don't have kids. I have a cat. No, but what I think is really incredible is when we were talking with the artists, this idea that a lot of what was brought up was that there was such an authenticity to the artists with autism, this unjaded look at art, this, you know, this very, and we've seen this throughout art history where artists have, like, they strive to have that, you know, that pure expression, that this is where it's coming from and it's very authentic, and it doesn't need words and it doesn't need to be guided by the art market. It's really coming from the artists themselves. And I think it's such a, you know, powerful thing that we often forget. The older that we get or the longer that we are in a field of work, we forget that passion and that authenticity. And I think, you know, a collaboration like that takes us all back to that moment where we get to reconnect with that again.
Yes, very good point. And it reminds me, I mean, in Jack's case with the beret, right, he had a preconceived notion that only French painters used easels. And so he had to, you know, he had to have that stretched to grow. And in another case, Katie Flores, who has, her Jaguar is in the show, but her work is rapidly changing even since the show. Mm-hmm. And Joy has observed just how bold her use of color is. And so she'll have these, she just has a color palette that is so intuitive and so confident and strong. And if you watch her paint, she just picks a color and it's right on the canvas. And she's prolific, and she's very, what's the word? Just very intentional with color. Mm-hmm. And they're combinations that are just bold. And it's exciting. It's exciting to watch. But I think that has it's set free other people who watch her at work. And for the artists who maybe are thinking, well, you know, that wouldn't be marketable because someone won't buy it for their living room. That doesn't matter to Katie. I mean, she wants this green with this pink, and there is a freedom there that's
definitely.
It's it's enviable, right? To the typical artists who maybe have gotten overly aware of commercialism.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think this leads perfectly into my next question of what are some of the takeaways that you've had or that the community has had in response to this exhibition?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think collaboration is just so key. One of the takeaways is that how much we grow by collaborating with others. Another takeaway is that the shared special interest or passion is so often a bridge to making new friends and to inclusion, right? Whether it's music or art or trains or, you know, whatever that special interest is, that very often discovering that and pairing people based on that is a great way to form relationships and to start inclusion. And that the idea that we're more alike than we're different, people discover that as they get acquainted and say yes to those unusual conversations. They realize, oh, we love the same, you know, the same colors, or that we're just more alike than we are different. Let's see. The other takeaway is the simplicity of this, right? The simplicity of that idea is that let's take people who love the same thing and let them do it together. It's a very simple concept. And I think it's something we all can do. And so many folks want to help those who are marginalized or underrepresented, and we don't know how to do it. But I think some of the solutions are really simple. It's to say, well, what are you interested in? I'm interested in that too. Could we do it together? So
or let me learn more about that so that I can develop my interest. Mm-hmm. You know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do you how has the community received this exhibition?
Well, the interest of the places, I started calling places, right, to hang it, and either restaurants I'd been to where there was artwork on the walls, or public libraries. Everyone I called said yes, which was evidence of that idea that people want to help, but they don't know how to. Mm-hmm. And so even the public library, San Diego Central Library, their schedule was booked, but she said, we have 50 some branches. Let me introduce you to them. I know some of them will want it. So everyone said yes. And that was great. I mean, that's just a great reception and a great indication of people's interest in inclusion. And several people want to do it again. Rich Walker has Art on 3rd down in Chula Vista, and he wants to do something. He either wants this show to continue there, or he wants to do it again and be a host there. And Naomi's had a lot of interest in repeating it, and several of the artists, Amanda also very much wants to expand it and show more of the artist's work. So that's a great sign, and I think we'll definitely do it again and invite additional pairs of artists to collaborate. And So it's been really well received. And what I loved, one of the library, we were at the one of the branch libraries in Rancho, Rancho Benaskitas. And they had a Saturday morning program for families, and it was the day that the art show was opening in their community room. And what I loved, Jungle Poppins played, and there were families with lots of young children. And I thought, oh, these kids, they'll stay for the music, but when I start the gallery talk, they will probably leave, because they were 3, 4, 5, 6. I thought they're not gonna be so interested in this. But it so surprised me, and it was such a great encouragement that the next generation will be far more inclusive than, that there's a moving trend toward inclusion, because the kids were so fascinated, and they can understand artwork, right? Because it's a nonverbal expression. And Katie's big florals, I think they watched Katie and Ethan and Brendan were the 3 artists at that time who were speaking, and they watched them speak, and they really could identify with them. I think because all kids love to draw. Well, maybe that's not true, but so many kids, are artists. It's like that Picasso quote where he says the greatest artist has to return to being a child. And so the kids were watching, in a sense, these big kids talk about their artwork, and they were fascinated. They hung on every word, and they were the most attentive and stayed through the end of the whole thing. And that was a beautiful thing to see, their fascination and their interest. And so we didn't talk about autism necessarily, but they were just in 3-dimensional, experiential learning. They were seeing, here's someone who has differences and yet is the same and loves the same things as me. And that, in the end, that's what opens the door to belonging in community, is to just see others as different, but the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to, saying yes to those conversations, which I absolutely love. Andrea, I don't know if you still wanted to share those images that you have.
Well, let me, what, I'm having trouble because of my output here. I can't find my share screen button. It sort of disappeared on me. So I don't know that I can. Let me press a few things and see if it pops up for you. Can you see that?
No.
Yeah, I think I disabled it somehow or other.
Well, maybe you can share those images with me, and we can share them with the community at a different time. But
okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrea. I think, I think this concept applies to so many parts in our lives. I think there's so much my community versus other communities, and this concept of, I love it, say yes to the conversation. And they might be uncomfortable, but we'll learn to speak the same language and find ways to communicate. And I think it's such a powerful message.
Right.
And
I think the other part that's radical about inclusion, right, is it applies to other people groups, and it's just having that approach to anyone who feels other for any number of reasons, whether it's ability or race or color or creed, right? To think in terms of risk, taking the risk to have the unlikely conversation, and then humility, saying, no one's better than another, and we don't need to be prideful, but we can humble ourselves and learn. And then kindness, just choosing kindness.
And then the other thing that we learn from you now as well is that it's important to have more than just a conversation, and turn this into something tangible, like an exhibition, something that is taking it to the next step and mobilizes us. So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Husha.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And Andrea, thank you so much for telling us more about this really incredible exhibition and concept and ideas. And I look forward to sharing more with the community and getting your responses as well. If you have thoughts, ideas, send us an email, post on our Instagram, on our Facebook, share your thoughts, and we're really interested in getting your feedback. And also check out our website, and check out on our website, you can find the websites and Instagrams for the artists that are in the show. Check out their websites and support in that way. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Husha.